So it's that time again, folks, where we got to kind of step away from the X's and O's and go back to the psychological well, so to speak. And we've talked before on this channel about discipline and motivation and even habit forming, but what we haven't talked about is, even though we know what we have to do, how do we even get that process started? How do we establish good habits so that we can achieve success in our goals? That's what I'm here to talk about today. So, habit forming, or rather the altering of one's habits from negative to positive, can be difficult in the same context as it is changing one's diet. If it's something objectively deleterious, like for instance a hard drug habit, you don't need to do that. Quitting cigarettes, for instance. Cigarette smoking is not essential to life, whereas eating is. So it's very difficult to detach yourself from poor eating habits because you can't not eat. Cold turkey isn't an option. And so if we expand that concept to the broader principle of changing habits, we kind of run into the same problem where a lot of the negative habits that we wish to change, that we've identified we have to change in order to achieve our goals, are kind of part and parcel to our day-to-day lives, and they're things that we can't just quit cold turkey and start from scratch. So we got to figure out a way to replace the negative with something positive, either in one go or incrementally until we get to the new positive habit that we're going for. There's a method for this, folks, that is referred to quite simply as a habit loop. Now, the habit loop has three fundamental components, which is the cue or the motivation, the routine that follows that motivation, and then the perceived reward from that routine. Now, to add a layer of nuance and to make this actionable, following the cue, there is usually some kind of craving or desire that then initiates the routine, particularly in unwanted behaviors, in unwanted habits. The first step in habit-changing behaviors using the habit loop method is you don't fight the cue, you don't fight the craving, but you replace the response to that craving with something that better aligns with your goals or overall objectives. I was talking to an old friend of mine prior to the recording of this video who is trying to incrementally get himself back to a more health and fitness focused lifestyle, and he, until just recently, had a bit of a soda habit. Instead of just going cold turkey from soda, what he's done is he lives in a place that is abundant with fresh fruits. So now he makes fruit juice smoothies, which, while high in terms of sugar content commensurate to his activity level, they at least come with a load of vitamins and minerals. The process involved means that he drinks less of them, so his overall sugar consumption is reduced just by merit of that alone. And furthermore, the process of having to make them means that he is more mindful of the impact that they're having on his diet. He's not just casually tossing back Pepsis and Fantas anymore. So when discussing the habit-forming loop in the context of diet nutrition, we also have to bring into the discussion the concept of self-control and how that affects this entire process. Where does that fall in? There's a fascinating study, a longitudinal analysis by Whedon et al. That was done in 2020. Essentially what this study established was that self-control was not necessarily a facilitator for habit formation. So that's not to say that self-control cannot affect habit formation, but that you don't necessarily have to have ironclad will or supreme discipline in order to form good habits. You just need trigger time. You just need to actually execute repeatedly. The biggest key takeaway of the study is that habit formation developed more firmly over the course of a 90-day period. Now, I really enjoy this study because they did a lot of devil's advocate and second guessing their results, in that they questioned as to why self-control didn't necessarily come into play in terms of habit forming, and their conclusions were as follows. First of all, this is a big one for me, is because this was an experiment and the subjects were being tracked, the very act of being monitored seems to have facilitated the process of habit formation. You know, it's like that old saying, that which is tracked, that which is, measured improves. I wholeheartedly believe that. That's why I generally track performance metrics on everything that I do that I care to improve. Another thing that they identified in the design of the study was that they did not necessarily set the subjects up with circumstances where they were presented with conflicting temptations to their habit-forming behavior. So, for instance, if I were the study of the subject and I was trying to change my habit of eating sugar cookies, and they designed the study so that I had the option of every third day I was presented with a sugar cookie, I could have nothing, I could have a protein bar, which is, like a better alternative to a sugar cookie, but somewhat similar, kind of like how I explained my buddy switched from from soda to juice, or I could have, like a piece of cake or something as bad as a sugar cookie, but it's not exactly a sugar cookie. They didn't necessarily do that, and so they can't objectively say that they measured the effect that conflicting temptation would have on that 90-day habit-forming process. Another big takeaway that they got in this study is that habit forming can be influenced by certain contextual behaviors, kind of like a if-then order of operations. Like, if I open the refrigerator, I will grab an apple instead of a cookie type thing. Kind of like physics, where the very act of observing something changes its behavior, the scientists in this study suggest that perhaps their instructions to the participants may have generated this sort of implementation intention in the subjects that then, contextually, I would say positively influenced their habit-forming process. I don't want to spend the runtime of this video talking about one study, but it's a great read for those of you interested in the fundamental mechanics of habit forming. There's a couple other things that I've picked up kind of in my research over the years on this topic that conveniently there are quite a few infographics that can explain at a glance. First of all, maybe because our week is 7 days, so 4 is more than half, but frequency seems to greatly affect the formation of new habits, and 4 or more seems to be the magic number. And then, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't add to that consistency seems to be the next most important determining factor to make habits stick. There is a difference between frequency and consistency, folks. Frequency is iterative. Consistency is you've been doing that iterative frequency week after week for X amount of weeks, X amount of days. It's the aggregate volume, to use strength and conditioning terms, of the habit-forming behavior. One final caveat to consider too, folks, is that the harder the habit is, the further away from baseline you go, the bigger a pendulum shift, the longer it's going to take to establish. The same rules apply, you're just going to have to work at it more because it's a bigger deviation from the norm. So the big takeaway here, folks, is it's not about discipline, it's not about staying hard, it's not about turning away your cravings, it's about replacing your purely hedonic behaviors to more productive ones. Increase your frequency of doing so, and consistently do so for a meaningful period of time. Stay in the fight, folks. Thanks for watching.